Welcome back to Beernid 40K and another edition of Top Kill Teams of the Month. Today I've got 5 more teams to talk about that have left their stamp on the meta. And with some big events coming up, we're getting a glimpse for how things are shaping up post-elites, and with actual rules packs for big events like the SoCal Open out there in people's hands, being played out there on the tabletops of Terra. Now we've got people playing all kinds of different rule sets out there right now, so my hope is to boil this down into what I think will affect the big events to come. What is the meta? What teams are doing well and why? And basically look at some of the factors as to what is keeping these guys or allowing these guys to be at the top right now. Some of you might want to look at these teams yourselves and kind of theory hammer, how do you think your team will fare against them? However, I'm not sharing super specific tactics as much today because a lot of these events are actually in preparation for something big, and I don't want to steal their thunder by saying, oh yeah, this guy will be at the SoCal Open running this faction with this specific counter, because they worked really hard to build the teams to do well enough to get here. And like I said, a lot of these guys are doing these tournaments in preparation for the big boy events that only happen a few times a year. Things like the SoCal Open, or what's going to come up after that is the LVO here in the States. So I do still think this video will be useful to those of you comp players out there with a bit of an idea as to what's currently been going on. And I also think that new players will get something from this because a lot of you just want to know what factions are good right now. So there's going to be stuff in this video for everybody. So with that out of the way, let's jump into it. Let's look at the 5th place for May and July 2019. Number 5, Adeptus Astartes. Coming in at number 5, the Adeptus Astartes. I was able to play well enough to make my own top faction video again for the 2nd month in a row with an arena win and an event with free choice secondaries. Now this is important. I keep barking up the tree for free choice secondaries to become more widespread after BAO, because suddenly what these do is they make the impossible become possible. Using the roster to tailor your kill team while also changing up secondaries that work the best for your team and work against the specific faction you're playing against just seems like a superior format to me than the random secondaries of Ultima or set secondaries like we see most often in competition. The fact is that when you limit something, a competitive player will look at the packet for an event and say, oh, there's no good third secondary here for mission 3 for this faction. So rather than play anything they want and have a chance with it, we're seeing folks take the path of least resistance at these events because people are smart. Some of you are going to disagree. You're going to say, hey, it's all about skill. But the thing about it is that the proof is in the fact that Astartes just a few months ago were deemed non-viable in Arena by some very respected players. However, it feels like asking a fish to climb a tree when you tell something like the Tau to take options for melee. And a lot of factions just don't shine as well with fixed secondaries or random secondaries, and Astartes is one of these. Yet, with free choice secondaries and things like the new company veterans from Elites, there are some hidden gems in the book to choose from. Paired with the ability to tailor secondaries to that enemy faction and your own roster's abilities, suddenly we see factions and builds that had previously not done as well or just were not taken by serious players. With Astartes, a lot of people are looking hard at the Salamanders chapter right now, and they're right to do so with the 6 free rerolls potentially per turn. In the close quarters of Arena though, I like the Space Wolves for some of the war gear options. The fact is that you just have so many options for special weapons now, in addition to hitting on 2s and melee. This makes a very strong horde counter, even at 100 points, and it gets even better at 125. Now the event that I played in had a bye round. There were uneven numbers of players, but I still managed to come out tied for first even though I had one less round in the event. And after a year of crickets chirping, nothing heard from the Astartes players and top 8s around the world, I am happy to see them win an event. Glad that it was me that piloted it, but happy either way to see them get in the top 8 somewhere when just so recently they were talked about as non-viable. So they get a spot in top 5 in today's video. Coming in at number 4, the team I tied with for first in the tournament, Orcs are back, and better than ever post-elites with some cool options to play around with. I've heard some anecdotal good things about the new flash kits, but the point is what scares me is the buff to their speed from Red Ones Go Fasta, as well as their new ability to field more knobs than ever before, which gets even crazier as folks prep for the 125 points of the SoCal Open in October. Before, sure, knobs, they were rough. It wasn't the best proposition to be setting up against from them or to have them get in melee. But with a little luck, a bit of skill, you could usually deal with the 2 knobs you knew you'd be facing when playing against orcs. But now, you have a team that can take several knobs at 2 wounds and a 4-up. So you actually need to think about AP and multiple damage in addition to the speedy horde. Spamming flamers isn't good enough anymore with 3.5 hits average statistically. That used to work when basically you knew you'd be facing boys or the debuff to hit from commandos as the main threat. You'd just force enough dice through and the low save, the low LD, put them at risk for breaking like clockwork. But now there is the potential for so much more beef, and they are fast, which gives players on the other side of the table a lot of threats to deal with and big decisions to make early on. I personally think we might just see even more of these guys popping up at Nova, the SoCal Open, so test against them and see for yourself. I think you'll be surprised if you haven't faced a solid Orc player post-elites. And coming in at number 3, we have the Heretic of Stardies of all factions, who have done very well in recent events with outright tourney wins in addition to multiple top 8 showings. The addition of Khorne Berserkers did a lot to buff their punch, and the SoCal Open rules are allowing them to pile in and fight again, even if it's against a model that they didn't charge that turn. So this really adds some punch to that special ability. Note that this also does buff Tyranids and cults as well, so they're a thing to keep in mind, especially with Kraken and Objectives games for Tyranids and Pauper Princes letting Rock Cutter Genestealer cultists re-roll hit rolls, so their -1 isn't such a problem. But getting back to the Chaos Marines, they still have dirt cheap scoring cultists. They let them work the Objectives game a bit easier than the Loyalist Marine factions like the Death Watch and the Grey Knights. With the Loyalists, you're so starved for bodies that the real strategy is to hold true primaries and deny the opponent one or more of theirs through auto-hitting weapons, good positioning, and in the case of Grey Knights, psychic attacks. Yet all of the Heretic factions have decently priced scoring. And finally, some of the recent buffs from elites gave the titular Chaos Marines a buff, and they're finally coming into the spotlight rather than feeling like second best to things like the Death Guard, for now at least. The truth is that the core book just left them basic and underwhelming, with nothing great to play in competitions other than cultist spam. But Elites has changed this. However, the meta is just in a big shift in general right now, and we have no idea. We have to wait and see if these are doing well just because they're the new kids on the block with a cool toy that a lot of people haven't seen piloted well so far, or if this run of luck is going to stick around a bit longer. Personally, I hope for the latter because these guys are the main protagonists in the fluff of 40K, and they should be scary. So I hope to see them in more episodes of Top Kill Teams in the future. And at number 2, we have the Tau. These could almost be number 1 for me because I'm buddies with the player that took top spot at the event that brings this faction in today's top list. But the main thing that I think makes me say you should sit up and take notice of this particular Tau win is that the event they won yesterday was a SoCal Open prep tourney. This, in my opinion, is a more accurate kind of a gauge to the current meta because it's not just some guy on the internet typing up that he won, and you ask only to find out that there were doors on the open board or 200-point optional commanders or other weird janky rules. No, this is a snapshot of possibility for a real event that may be one of the biggest so far this year on the West Coast US, and Tau took top spot there. Funnily enough, the Tau at this event were run by the exact same player that piloted them to a second place victory at the recent Bay Area Open and was also in second place in last month's Top Kill Team video. He faced a range of players from Eldar to Imperial Guard at this event, and speaking of which, I think the Eldar get a bit of a special mention here because they took second at the same event and it was very close. So with the past success of Eldar at LVO, BAO, I think we still need to keep our eye on them as well. But the Tau have a lot going on for them as a shooty horde. They can take objectives, they have fly, they have rail rifles, they have the endlessly frustrating savior protocols, which means you often need to take out drones before the big guns you actually want to kill, even though those big guns are shooting you as you do it. So Tau, they definitely seem to prefer the open board according to every player I know. So I don't know if we'll see them take the top spot in a big arena event anytime soon. Rather, at multiple day events, with one-day arena, one-day open board, we'll likely see players taking different teams just because they feel more comfortable with their model collections doing different jobs. But the SoCal Open FAQ gave us some interesting things to look at for the Tau. Like, they now have the ability for crisis suits to open doors. So, will we see these models most people don't play in a game type most Tau players use other factions to win? We'll know in a few months. All right, so it's time for the number 1 faction this month. If you like these kinds of videos, hit that like button, subscribe, and with that out of the way, let's look at number 1, the top faction for May and July 2019. And the number one team for May and July 2019, seeming to do well at any event that they go to right now, the Drukhari. These guys got some kind of magic through elites. Because remember those offshoot or bespoke tournaments I was talking about where it might be 200 points at one, 125 at another, commanders or optional commanders somewhere else? The fact is, these guys don't seem to mind what kind of an event they're in right now. They've taken top spot in commanders, top spot in 125, top spot at BAO mock events. There was even an event in Spain where the Drukhari were in every spot of the top 3 rankings. Yes, that's right. First place, Deldar. Second place, Deldar. And guess what? Third place, they got it there too. A lot of tournament organizers are correcting what they feel to be a typo in the Elites book with the Drukhari rack stat line. We know from the preemptive SEO FAQ that this will also be the case at the SoCal Open. So, if this is the magic bean pushing them over the edge, they'll have that ammunition at the SoCal Open as well. Now, I'm putting the SEO version of the corrected stat line on the screen now in case you want to screenshot it and use it in your games or test against it, whatever. But personally, I'm happy to see these guys on a top kill team list, let alone at number 1 in this episode, because let's face it, they were kind of middle of the road in tournaments with core book rules, sitting pretty firmly in tier 2, if not lower tier 2. Sure, they had decent matchups against things like Imperial Guard, which any melee fast faction has, or Marine factions, yes, but they weren't something that worried me. And when I faced them round 3 of last year's Las Vegas Open, they held their own and got stronger as the game progressed, yes, but I was able to get that early lead. And after a few rounds, it started to look close, but the gains in the late game just weren't enough for the Drukhari when compared to some of the great builds out there on the tabletops of Terra. Now after Elites, I almost don't know what I'll be facing exactly from a dedicated competitive player running the Dark Eldar. I have some suspicions, but it's not as set in stone as before. And they're not starting on such a back foot as before. So I have high hopes for these guys. I'm glad to see them make it to so many events, to top 8s, to top finishes. And I just want to say congrats to you Deldar players out there that placed, as well as every other player that ran the teams to eventual spots on this episode's list. I look forward to playing you guys at the SoCal Open in October. I hope you can make it there. So all right, that's this month's edition of Top Teams. Stay tuned and subscribe for more, since this channel is all about tactics, strategies, and meta-analysis of the kill team competitive scene. Did you win with a faction in a tournament that I didn't mention? Did any of these factions doing well surprise you? Do you have any other thoughts you think I should know? Leave them in the comments for me. So that's it. This is Beernid40K wishing you all the best in your games of Kill Team. I'll be back with more Kill Team content very soon, but signing off for now.